The valley did not simply hold a storm, it became the storm. The sky above Clearwater cracked open, spilling thunder like war drums across the mountains. Rain slammed against pine branches, bending them until they bowed to the earth. The river, normally a clear ribbon weaving gently between stones, had transformed into a monster. Brown and swollen, it surged with the violence of 1,000 fists dragging trees, logs, and anything else foolish enough to stand in its path. Ethan Hayes had seen storms before. As a forest ranger, storms were part of his life, as common as the boots on his feet or the rifle slung across his shoulder. But this storm felt different, angrier, older, as if the mountain itself was fighting to break free from the weight of the clouds. Beside him trotted Bruno, his golden companion. Rain clung to the dog's fur in heavy clumps, but his steps never slowed. He kept close to Ethan's side, his tail low, his ears twitching with every crack of thunder. To Ethan, Bruno wasn't just a dog. He was memory, loyalty, and courage wrapped in golden fur. He had carried Ethan through lonely winters, shared bread beside small campfires, and sat quietly during nights when silence pressed too hard on Ethan's chest. They walked the trail together, the mud sucking at their boots and paws, when Ethan heard it. A sound so sharp it cut through the storm like a blade. A cry. He froze. His breath hung in the wet air. For a second he wondered if it was just the wind through the trees. But then it came again, high and thin desperation given voice. Ethan's head snapped toward the river. His heart stuttered. On a stone half submerged and slick as glass clung a small creature. Tiny claws scraped, slipping, finding no purchase. Lightning flashed, and the truth seared itself into Ethan's eyes. It was a bear cub. Drenched, trembling, its black fur plastered to its body. Every second the water lunged at it like a predator, pulling, twisting, yanking its small frame toward the chaos. And on the far bank, its family. The mother stood tall, her roar splitting the night, but it was not the roar of rage. It was anguish, helplessness turned into sound. Two other cubs pressed against her massive legs, whimpering. She swiped her claws at the air as if she could tear the current apart with sheer will. But nothing she did mattered. Her baby was alone in the middle of the river, and she could not reach him. Ethan felt his gut twist. He had seen death before. He had seen hikers drown, seen deer washed downstream lifeless. He knew what the river demanded, and it never gave back what it claimed. And yet, as he stared at the cub's wide, terrified eyes, he knew he could not just stand there. His mind screamed at him, "Don't be a fool." The water would kill him too. But his heart, the part of him that had never stopped caring for life, no matter how small, ached with a pain that nearly brought him to his knees. "God," he whispered under his breath. Bruno whined at his side, his body tense, eyes locked on the cub. Ethan scanned the bank. The options were pathetic. A rope too short, a branch too far, slopes too steep. He could no more cross that river than he could fly. He slammed a fist into the mud in frustration. The storm swallowed the sound. Another cry ripped from the cub's throat, weaker this time, as its tiny paws lost grip for a heartbeat before finding stone again. It was only a matter of time. And then something shifted. Bruno stepped forward. His paws sank into the mud, his body low but determined. He looked at the cub, then at the river, then at Ethan. For a moment, the world fell silent, as if everything, the rain, the thunder, even Ethan's racing thoughts, waited for his choice. Bruno knew Ethan's voice broke before the word even finished. But the dog didn't wait for permission. Didn't need it. With one final glance at his master, Bruno sprinted down the bank. His golden body was a streak against the storm's gray, his muscles coiled with purpose. And then he leapt. For a single endless heartbeat, Ethan saw him suspended in midair, framed against lightning, his body stretched toward the chaos. Then the river swallowed him whole. Ethan's chest seized. The breath tore out of him like a wound. Bruno. The storm roared back. The current boiled, churning, dragging, hiding. For 1 second, 2 seconds, 3, nothing. The dog was gone. Ethan's knees buckled, the mud splashing up his legs. His vision blurred. He pressed his fists into the ground, unable to believe what had just happened. But then, miracle. Bruno's head burst from the water, gasping, coughing, but alive. His eyes were fierce, locked not on Ethan, but on the cub. The current dragged at him, but he did not fight upstream. Instead, he cut across diagonally, his body angling in a way that only instinct could have taught. Clever. Determined. Relentless. Ethan stumbled along the bank, shouting into the storm, his words lost in thunder, but hurled anyway. Come on, boy, not a command, not a recall, just raw desperation thrown like a lifeline. On the far side, the mother bear had stopped roaring, her massive head lowered, her eyes locked on the golden figure braving the flood. For one suspended moment in time, predator and prey, human and beast, all of them held their breath for a dog. The river was merciless. Each surge of brown water seemed to mock Ethan, screaming, "Try me. I dare you." On the slippery bank, Ethan stood paralyzed. Every muscle in his body ached to leap after Bruno, to tear the current apart with his bare hands. Yet reason slammed into him like a stone wall. If he went in, he wouldn't come back. He would vanish just like so many before him, swallowed, forgotten. His heart split in two. One half demanded action. The other whispered about survival, about futility, about what a ranger should do. He had ropes, training rules drilled into him like scripture. Never dive into flood water. Never. And yet, there was Bruno, his golden dog, cutting through the torrent like a spear of light. No hesitation, no plan, only raw devotion. For the first time that night, Ethan felt ashamed of his own fear. He remembered moments from his life when hesitation had cost him dearly, times when he had waited too long to speak up, to take a risk, to tell someone how much they mattered. Those choices still haunted him. And now, watching his dog plunge where he dared not, Ethan felt the crushing weight of that same hesitation. "God help him," Ethan muttered, his voice cracking, because Bruno was beyond saving if the river decided otherwise. Bruno's head bobbed between waves, his chest burning but his eyes locked on the cub clinging desperately to the rock. Each stroke was agony, yet he pressed forward, a creature driven by something purer than survival loyalty. Here lay the contrast that Ethan couldn't ignore. Humans often drown in thought, tangled in the net of what-ifs. But animals like Bruno, they acted, not from recklessness, but from a kind of truth that people forget when love calls you move. The bear cub slipped again, its tiny claws raking across the stone. The water tore at it, dragging, pulling. One more wave, and it would be gone. Ethan shouted from the shore, his throat raw, "Hold on." It was absurd. The cub couldn't understand him. But sometimes words are more than sound. They're a lifeline we throw into the dark, hoping someone will grab hold. And then, twist. The cub in a panic tried to scramble higher, but its back paw slipped off the stone completely. For a heart-stopping second, it dangled by one claw. Ethan's breath caught. This is it. But Bruno surged forward, not against the river, but across it, carving an angle that defied Ethan's every instinct. It wasn't random, it was strategy. Instinct refined by loyalty, a truth animals seem to understand without calculation. Sometimes the fastest path isn't straight ahead, but sideways. The golden dog slammed into the rock just as the cub's grip gave way. The collision was violent. Ethan thought both would vanish beneath the waves. Instead, Bruno barked once sharp and desperate, a sound that cut through the storm. The cub's tiny paw latched onto wet fur. For the first time, Ethan saw the impossible becoming real. Two creatures, natural enemies clinging to each other, not as predator and prey, but as brothers in survival. He fell to his knees in the mud, tears hot despite the cold rain. The lesson struck him like lightning. Courage doesn't always come from the strongest, or the smartest, or even the human. Sometimes it comes from the one who doesn't stop to ask why. That realization burned into him deeper than any scar. And still, the river wasn't finished. Because while Bruno had reached the cub, the hardest part was yet to come. The current wasn't going to release its prize so easily. As the two small figures fought to hold on, Ethan realized with a sickening twist in his gut, this was only the beginning. The river was no longer a river. It was a battlefield. And Bruno Golden, soaked, trembling, was a lone soldier fighting for two lives his own, and the cub clinging to him. Ethan's voice broke as he shouted from the bank, "Bruno, hold on!" His words felt useless against the roar, but he screamed anyway, because silence felt like surrender. Bruno's paws slashed through the water muscles, straining eyes fierce. The bear cub clung desperately, claws digging into wet fur. For a moment, Ethan thought it was working. For a heartbeat, hope bloomed. Then the river struck back. A massive log, black with rot and violence, came charging down the current. It smashed into Bruno's side with a sickening force. Both dog and cub vanished beneath the surface. Ethan's blood iced. His knees gave way. His vision blurred. No, not like this. He lurched forward, ready to dive into death itself. It didn't matter if he drowned, he couldn't stand on the shore, while his best friend vanished. But just as he took that step, the water broke. Bruno erupted upward, coughing, sputtering, but alive. His eyes locked on Ethan, as if to say, "Don't you dare give up on me now." And then came the twist Ethan never expected. Instead of fighting the current head-on, Bruno angled his body using the flood itself to carry him. He didn't resist the monster he bent with, it rode it, cut across it like a secret the river had kept hidden for centuries. The cub clung tighter, small and shivering, but still alive. Ethan's mind reeled. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chaos. This was instinct elevated into wisdom. While men calculated and hesitated, animals simply knew. And in that moment, Ethan understood something brutal and beautiful. Survival isn't about overpowering life's storms. It's about learning when to resist and when to flow. He staggered along the bank, following, stumbling over roots and mud, his voice hoarse as he shouted encouragement. "Come on, boy. Come on." Not a command. Not an order, but a prayer. On the far side, the mother bear had fallen silent. No more roars, no more frantic swipes at the air. Her massive head bowed low, her eyes black pools of ancient wildness fixed on Bruno. Predator and prey didn't exist anymore. In that storm there was only reverence. And still, the fight wasn't over. The cub's grip weakened its small body, sliding, slipping. Ethan's heart hammered as he saw its paw lose hold for tearing free of Bruno's back. No, Ethan's scream ripped through the valley, but Bruno twisted deliberately, rolling his body, offering his back again as if to say, "Climb, little one, I will not let go. The cub latched on claws, burying into soaked fur once more. Together, they surged forward, dog and bear bound not by species, but by something larger, an unspoken pact written in desperation and courage. Ethan felt his chest collapse in both terror and awe. He had thought he was the protector, the savior the ranger trained to guard life. But here, watching his dog redefine bravery, Ethan realized the truth. Sometimes the truest heroes walk on four legs. The current still raged. The fight was far from over. But hope, real, fierce, undeniable, burned again. Because, against every law of nature, against every reason to fail, Bruno had chosen faith over fear. And faith was winning. But rivers don't surrender without taking their toll. And before Bruno and the cub can touch solid ground, nature will test them with a trial fiercer than anything Ethan has ever seen. The river was not finished testing them. For a brief, fragile moment, it looked as though Bruno had outsmarted the current. He angled himself with quiet genius, using the flood's own fury to cut across instead of against it. The cub clung tighter, small claws buried deep in wet fur. Hope flickered, small, trembling, but alive. Then the storm roared, as if angered by defiance. A surge swelled from upstream, a wall of water carrying shattered branches, rocks, and the remnants of trees. The wave crashed into Bruno, forcing his head under. Ethan's heart shattered. "No!" he screamed, stumbling waist-deep into the freezing current, before instinct dragged him back. If he leapt in now, he'd die, and worse, he'd distract his dog from the one fight that mattered. Seconds crawled by like hours. Every beat of silence was a blade twisting deeper into his chest. And then Bruno surfaced again, coughing eyes blazing with something far stronger than instinct. Determination. But the cub was panicked now, thrashing tiny paws, clawing desperately. For a terrifying instant, it dragged Bruno down both heads, vanishing beneath the foam. This is where most rescues fail, not because of weakness, but because fear multiplies in water. Ethan knew it. Lifeguards knew it. Drowning victims often sink their saviors by sheer panic. And here, it was playing out in front of him. Ethan's lungs refused air. He watched helplessly as Bruno twisted, fighting not against the cub, but for it. And then, in an act that seemed impossible, the golden dog deliberately rolled, offering his back like a living raft. The cub's small body pressed down, claws digging in again. For the second time, Bruno surrendered his own safety to give the fragile creature a chance. It worked. They rose together, battered but bonded. Ethan felt tears mix with the rain on his face. He had seen bravery before in men, in soldiers, in people pushed to their edge. But this was different. This was pure. No thought of glory, no promise of reward. Just love, raw and unfiltered, carrying them both through hell. And yet, the river was relentless. Downstream, a new threat appeared, a jagged cluster of rocks where the current split. If Bruno struck them, he and the cub would be crushed. The current had carried them into a corridor with no way around. Ethan's fists clenched. His heart screamed at him to move. He sprinted along the bank, slipping in mud, crashing through underbrush, keeping pace as best he could. His voice cracked as he shouted, Come on, Bruno! Not a command, just faith spoken aloud." Bruno's strokes weakened his body, trembling, but he kept going, eyes fixed on the far side of the bank. The cub whimpered, but held on. And then the twist no one expected. The river shifted. A massive root system jutted out from the far bank, half submerged like a ladder nature had left behind. To anyone else, it was debris. To Ethan, it was salvation. He waded in ice water, rising to his chest, lungs gasping from the shock. He stretched out his arms, screaming, "Here, here!" Bruno turned his head, and in those dark, determined eyes, Ethan saw a promise. "I'll get him to you no matter what." With the last of his strength, Bruno kicked forward, every claw digging into the current, every muscle burning. Inch by inch, he cut through the last stretch, steering toward Ethan's outstretched hands. The cub slipped once, its paw sliding free. Ethan's heart stopped, but Bruno jerked upward, keeping himself between the cub and the water. One last desperate push, and Ethan's arms closed around the tiny, soaked body. Relief tore out of him like a sob. He pulled the cub tight against his chest, its body shaking but alive. On the far side of the river, the mother bear screamed a sound not of rage, but of overwhelming release. She had watched death reach for her child and seen a dog fight it back. Ethan stumbled backward to the bank, clutching the cub, but his eyes never left Bruno. His dog, freed of the weight, collapsed onto the root's chest, heaving sides, trembling, too weak to climb out. Ethan's heart broke all over again. The cub was safe. But Bruno was still trapped in the river's grasp, and Ethan realized the true test wasn't over. Not yet. The cub had been saved, but the dog who made the miracle possible was now at the edge of his own strength. And what happens next will force Ethan into the most dangerous decision of his life, whether to risk everything for the one soul who had always risked everything for him. The forest was still trembling from the storm, but now another kind of silence hung heavy in the air. It wasn't emptiness. It was anticipation, like the woods themselves were waiting to see what would happen next. The cub, wet and shivering, whimpered in Ethan's arms before wriggling free. With surprising strength, it stumbled across the muddy ground and collapsed into the embrace of its mother. She scooped her child against her chest, rocking, trembling, her guttural cries echoing like hymns of relief. Ethan should have felt safe then. The mission was over. Life had been returned to life. But when the mother bear turned, he froze. Her massive shoulders rippled with power. Her teeth glistened in the broken light, and beside her, rising from the mist, came another shadow. The giant male bear, towering muscles like boulders under his soaked fur. His eyes locked on Ethan. This was the moment Ethan had dreaded. He had saved their child. Yes, but animals don't follow human rules of gratitude. He braced for the charge, his pulse slamming like a war drum. Beside him, Bruno staggered weakly, barely able to lift his head. And then, the twist. The silver giant did not roar, did not lunge. Instead, he paused. His chest expanded, and with a slow, deliberate rhythm, he struck it once. Then again, the sound was not thunder. It was not anger. It was respect. Ethan's breath caught. The bear was not warning him. He was acknowledging him. A single gesture saying, "We saw, we know, we honor you." Bruno whimpered, his tail weakly thumping in the mud, as if even he understood. In that instant, Ethan realized he was witnessing something few humans ever would. The walls between species had cracked open just enough for respect to pass through. Predator and protector. Human and wild. Dog and bear. For one heartbeat in history, they were simply souls recognizing one another. He thought of all the ways humans claim dominance, our weapons, our walls, our endless need to prove mastery. And here was a truth far more powerful: respect is not taken. It is given silently in moments when courage outweighs fear. The mother pressed her cub tighter and turned toward the trees. The others followed, padding silently, into the mist. But the giant male lingered. He lifted his head, his eyes locking with Ethan's one last time. And then he let out a sound unlike any roar Ethan had ever heard. It was not a threat. It was a farewell. And just like that, they were gone. The forest exhaled as though it too had been holding its breath. The storm eased. The clouds began to thin, and for the first time all night, shafts of golden light pierced through the canopy. They fell across Bruno's wet fur, gilding him like a knight crowned by the sun. Ethan knelt beside his friend, his hand trembling as it stroked the dog's head. "You're a hero," he whispered, his voice breaking. Bruno's chest rose and fell in ragged rhythm, but his eyes softened. He didn't need the words. He already knew. Ethan looked across the river now, calmer, and felt something shift inside him. What had happened here wasn't just a rescue. It was proof. Proof that courage, respect, and love can cut across boundaries we believe are permanent. Proof that life in its rawest form honors sacrifice no matter where it comes from, and that truth would stay with him forever. But the night wasn't over. Because as the last echoes of the bears faded into the mist, Ethan realized something else. What Bruno had given wasn't just heroism. It was a reminder, a challenge, a call to live with the same courage every single day. And that thought would change him in ways he never expected. The storm may have passed, but storms of the heart leave echoes. And as Ethan and Bruno walked away from the river, the valley itself seemed to write their story in light, a memory destined never to fade. The storm had spent itself. What once was a sky torn apart now softened into calm, golden light. Shafts of sunshine poured through the shattered clouds, falling across the mud, the roots the river that had raged only moments before. The valley looked transformed, almost holy, as though the earth itself wanted to carve this memory into eternity. Ethan sank down beside Bruno, his hand resting on the dog's trembling chest. Each breath was shallow, labored, but steady. He whispered, voice raw, "You did it, boy. You saved him. You saved us all." Bruno's eyes fluttered closed, not from weakness, but from peace, the kind that comes when you've given everything and asked nothing in return. For long minutes, Ethan sat there in silence. No thunder, no roar, just the sound of the river settling into quiet, as if even nature respected what had just unfolded. He thought of the bears fading into the mist. He thought of the massive male who had given him a gesture of honor instead of violence. And he thought of the cub alive, because one golden dog refused to let fear decide his fate. Ethan had walked these forests for years, believing he understood them. But tonight taught him something no handbook or training could. The wild isn't just danger and survival. It is memory, spirit, and connection. It is respect that transcends the limits of language and species. And then came the twist he never expected. As he lifted his gaze, the river glinted in the sunlight, not brown, not violent, but glowing, almost clear again. And in that reflection, Ethan didn't just see water. He saw a story written across its surface. A dog's courage, a cub's survival, a mother's tears, and a moment of respect between worlds. He realized this wasn't just about a rescue. This was about the bond that can appear once in a lifetime, the kind that redefines how you see love, loyalty, and the meaning of life itself. Ethan pressed his forehead to Bruno's, whispering, "You're my hero. Always." The dog's tail tapped once, weak, but certain, like a signature sealing the memory. They sat together as the valley healed itself. The clouds thinned, the air cleared, and for a fleeting heartbeat, Ethan felt that the whole forest was watching, bearing witness, so that long after he and Bruno were gone, this story would still echo here. Storms will always come. Rivers will always rage. But sometimes, if you're lucky, you get to witness the miracle that shows you why courage matters. And when you do, you never forget. Ethan rose slowly, Bruno leaning against his leg as they walked away from the river. Behind them, the valley whispered its farewell in birdsong and sunlight. Ahead of them stretched the trail home. But deep inside, Ethan knew he was no longer the same man who had walked into the storm. He was carrying with him something bigger than survival. He was carrying a memory written in light. This wasn't only a story of danger and rescue. It was about trust, respect, and the kind of love that bridges the impossible. Maybe you've felt it too, in the eyes of your dog, in the comfort of a pet, in the unspoken bond that asks nothing and gives everything. Hold on to that, because storms will pass, but the courage of love remains forever. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the quiet courage animals carry and the unspoken love they give us every single day, then don't let it fade when the video ends. Hit that like button, not just for this tale, but for Bruno, for every loyal companion who has ever stood by our side in storms of their own. Subscribe if you believe the world needs more stories like this, real stories, human stories, stories where respect, courage, and love matter more than fear. And share it with someone you care about, someone who loves animals as much as you do. Because sometimes a simple story can be the reminder they need that loyalty still exists, that bravery still shines, and that miracles can be found in the bond we share with the creatures who walk beside us. Thank you for being here, friend. Until next time, may your days be full of light, and may you never forget the courage of love.